wild story on so many levels. Phoebe, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Maddie. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's been a day for both of us. So I think this should be a fun podcast because I don't know about you, but I don't know why today just felt like literally the world's longest day.
It's that time of year, getting ready for the holidays, kind of checked out.
Yes. I'm actually going to Disneyland this week, so in my mind it is Disney week. Like I am just waiting until Thursday when I can get on the plane and go. So that, and also the fact that it's like dark when I wake up, it's dark when I leave work. I'm ready.
Yep, that's true.
I'm ready for the holidays. Like
me too.
Yeah. And I feel like this time of year, it's funny. I feel like I have like a push to the end because that week, after Christmas but before New Year's is like all about strategic planning. I'm focusing, doing my vision board, etc. And so I'm like trying to just make it through because like I want that week to be really impactful, but I'm also like I think today has just been a day.
Yep, I feel you.
Yeah. So enough about my nonsense. Why don't you tell me about your business? Because I think it's really exciting. You and I chatted a little bit prior to this recording, and I want you to tell the people about it because I think it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I work with entrepreneurs to help them scale their business through the use of mindset work. And I help them to design their business around their life rather than their life around their business.
Yes, I think this is so important. This is actually like interesting because it kind of ties into the conversation I had last night around setting boundaries in particular. Like, that episode I think would have come out, so you guys would have heard me talk about how I had to start setting some like serious boundaries around the podcast. Like I'm only allowed to book one a day because it's what I love to do, but if I don't set enough boundaries around my business, then like I'm not showing up as my best self.
Yes. Well, and it sneaks up on you because it's not like you can always set boundaries preemptively. You have to sometimes experience the situation and then respond with boundaries. And that's where people can tend to not realize that things have gotten out of control. And then it feels hard to go back and set those boundaries because you've already let it get to a place where it's uncomfortable to change things.
Yes. And I think this is especially the case with entrepreneurs because most of the time you are like a one-man show and you're doing all of these things and you're like already pushing yourself to hit your limits. And a lot of the time, like, I think that we also get like a little bit of a thrill from pushing ourselves to be like, what's the limit? What's the end? But once you hit that, you're like, well, I don't ever want to do that again. So I'm sure you have a lot of tips and tricks that you coach your clients through about how to be in the right mindset so you can be the best and most effective version of yourself and when conducting your business.
Well, what's ironic is what makes us great entrepreneurs is the very thing that then holds us back when we get to a certain level. So the mindset that got you where you are is not the mindset that will get you where you're going. And the mindset that got you where you are when you started your business was one of hustle and scrappy, say yes to everything. And it is energizing because it's exciting because you're building something, right? But staying in that place forever leads to burnout, right? And then we end up resenting our businesses and secretly sabotaging them.
Yes.
Then we're like, what happened? I used to be so motivated. I used to be so disciplined or whatever. And it's not that anything has changed. You're still that same person, but you need to adopt a new strategy at this new level in business that you're at.
What's this new strategy look like?
Yeah, well, so typically when people start out, they are in the hustle grind mentality, say yes to everything, right? So at some point, when you get to a place where you can actually look back and evaluate what is the actual strategy that has worked and how do I now create that intentionally? Because in the beginning, we don't necessarily have a strategy.
Totally.
You might be like, I'm going to try social media advertising, or I'm going to try podcasting, or whatever it is. And maybe you're trying multiple things at once, which is the worst thing, because then you've got, you've got your attention is maybe 10% in 5 different directions, right?
You're just
So
throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what.
yes. Yes. And through that experience, you get very attached to these things that you're doing. And so at some point, you have to sit and evaluate, okay, what is the actual strategy moving forward based on this information that I have? And then how do I move myself out of those roles? Because what we want to move into is a CEO mindset.
Mm,
Initially, the mindset is one of operator, everything, right? You're wearing
yeah.
all the hats. And then we need to move into CEO mindset. And that looks very different.
Yeah.
And the same thing for your life, right? When you start out your life, you're operating everything in your life. And at some point, when life gets complex, when you need to be elsewhere, you want to be in the CEO role of your life as well,
Yeah.
which is kind of a weird thing to think about.
Tell me everything about this CEO mindset, because I feel like with I'm at this place right now with myself and with my podcast. Like, it's off the ground, it's moving, we have like momentum, but I'm getting to the place now where I want to be more like strategic and thoughtful about how I'm going about every aspect of this. And I feel like now is the perfect time for me to be transitioning into this CEO mindset. So like tell me everything, because I'm so curious.
Yeah, so you start with the end in mind. So, what's the vision that you're working towards with your business? What do you need your business to do for you, for your
Mm,
life, for the world, right? So, a lot of times we have an idea of that, but as we go along, things shift and we have to pivot, and new information comes along, and things that we never thought were possible become, on the horizon. And so it starts with the end in mind. And what do you want your business to do for you? And getting really clear on that, at least at a high level.
okay.
And then from there, we look at what do we need to achieve in order for our business to create that vision, right? And then from there, we look at what is our role in that. So
Mm,
typically, the CEO role is things that only you can do, right? So I'm podcasting for my business now because only I can do that, right?
yeah.
A lot of times it's content creation or public speaking or things like that. We want to look at what can
Mm,
only the CEO do. And then we look at everything else. There's a what's the word? An exercise I take my clients through where we audit their time and we look at how they're spending their time. And then we look at, of all the things you're spending time on, what do we want to automate? What do we want to stop doing? What do we want to delegate? And what do we want you to keep? Right.
mm,
And the things that you keep are the CEO level tasks, right? And everything else we look at for either automation, cutting out, or delegation.
yeah. That makes sense. How did you learn all of this stuff? Like, maybe we have to go back like to the beginning, because you're very like articulate and knowledgeable about this space, and it's incredibly helpful to listen to. And I want to know how you got to this point, like what brought you here.
Yeah. Well, if I go all the way back, it started because I was very successful in high school as a high school athlete, and I got a scholarship to run track and field and cross country in college, Division two,
Why
NCAA.
do I know that that's true? Like, I can tell. I don't know why I can tell, but I can tell that that
It's
makes sense to
it's
me.
an attitude, right?
I think so.
Nobody wants to run. Nobody wants to run.
It's true.
Um, the people that do and want to at a high level, there's something a little bit off about us. Um, so yeah, so I worked my butt off to get an athletic scholarship. It was the only way that I was going to be able to afford college, especially because I went to a college that was $30,000 a year, like 12 years ago. So it was expensive, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so I the first year that I was there, I found out that I had a degenerative disease in my back, and it was causing numbness and tingling, and
Oh,
I would
damn.
be running and my leg would go numb, and it just wasn't going well. Anyway, so I tried a
Yeah.
lot of physical therapy, a lot of shots, a lot of all kinds of things, and eventually I had to have surgery. Well, the surgery didn't work. So I ended up having
What?
to drop out of school because I lost my scholarship. I couldn't run, all the things. So all my dreams crashing down, right?
Wait, that's so crazy. They just revoked your scholarship because of
Yeah.
like in something entirely out of your control.
Yeah, well, and I couldn't
Wow.
keep up on the coursework either because it's a really hard school. It's up
Yeah.
there with the Ivy Leagues as far as like the curriculum, and I just couldn't keep up with the rigorous demands because I couldn't sleep. I was on 14 different
Holy
medications for
crap.
my pain, and it was bad. So I moved back home with my parents and started going to the state school. And my pain continued. I tried more physical therapy, more shots. Every doctor is like, well, our shot's different.
Right?
I inquired about stem cells, but back then it just wasn't really a thing. So I ended
Mhm.
up having a second surgery, a spinal fusion. So they
Whoa.
actually take out the disc and they fuse the bones. So it changes the structure of your body forever, right? So they're like, you can't run anymore. You can't really do anything like
Whoa.
very physical because it will damage the other spine, the rest of your spine. So I come out of that surgery.
Wait, did they expect you to just be like sedentary for the rest of your life or?
Well, no, I mean, you can still do normal people things, but like I was a very high level athlete. So
Yeah.
like I can't really continue my athletics or anything like that. So it was definitely a blow to, but at this point I was in so much pain.
Mhm.
I was okay to sacrifice that.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't able to sleep. I was in pain every single day. I was basically handicapped
Yeah.
essentially and on so many pills. Um, so when I came out of that surgery though, I ended up getting a staph infection in my spinal cord.
Oh my
And
God.
so I had to go right back in
No.
surgery. And then I was on a IV PICC line for antibiotics 4 times a day for 8 weeks. So I was
Oh, shoot.
bedridden. So we
Wait.
moved a hospital bed into my living room at my parents' house, and I lived there for 8 weeks, covered in bed sores. And it just because I was so thin at this time, I had lost like 30 pounds, and I was an athlete, so I didn't have that really to lose.
You were all muscle.
Yeah, it was not good, but drinking the Pedialyte and all the things to try to keep weight on me. But anyways, survived all of that. Survived all of that. Um,
Wait, how did you get better? Was it just with time or?
Well, they said I had a 50% chance of survival after it's one of those things where that you don't know if it's going to be antibiotic resistant.
Okay.
So when they take you off the antibiotics, they're like, we'll know in 2 weeks if you're going to live. So it's like a
What?
very, it was
What
a
the
very
what?
scary waiting game to see like if the infection comes back. So if it comes back, it's pretty much a death sentence. Like the antibiotics didn't work. There's nothing else we can
This is a wild story on so many levels. Like I have so many thoughts that we would have to do like a whole other episode on because
do.
like the whole system, everything about this is crazy from you being like kicked out of school to
Yeah.
you like having to do multiple surgeries and then just the way that they're going about the surgeries and then the fact that
Yeah.
they're like, well, if this doesn't work, like it's been good knowing you. It's so crazy. So you defied the odds, thankfully, and you survived. And then what happened?
So I was told that because these surgeries didn't work, that I should go on disability for the rest of my life because I won't be able to work and I will always have pain, etc. So I basically was like, I'm not doing that. So I just kept medicating myself, which
Yeah.
wasn't great, but it's the only option I had. And eventually, after about 2 years, I think, of that, my body. So I went on to build a career in politics. Actually, I
Wow.
worked my way up really, really fast. Was running the second in command of the state of Arkansas. It was going really well, and then my body broke under the weight of all of these pills that I was taking. And literally almost overnight, I developed autoimmune diseases all over my body. I had eczema all over my body. I had rheumatoid arthritis. I had fibromyalgia. I had ringing in my ears, whatever that is. Just everything
Like
broke.
literally all the things at one time.
And I kind of wasn't surprised. I mean,
Yeah.
the amount of medication I was taking, it was like, no one is going to live very long with this.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to make the most of it. So I got fired. So I couldn't keep up on my work. I lost my job, my career, my whole ass career. Right. So I was the
Because
primary.
of extenuating circumstances, I cannot. But keep going.
I was the primary breadwinner at the time, so it was a pretty devastating blow to my family, and I was like 26, you know.
Oh my God, you're
So
so young.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, it was like good and bad because I had the rest of my life to figure it out, but I also felt like every time I'd gotten what I wanted, life just for
Yeah.
no reason, like not my fault, it would just be taken away from me.
Yeah.
So here I was again having to start over. So I went into Eastern medicine at this point. I was like,
Yeah.
Western medicine told me go on prednisone, yet another drug, right? And like
Western
everyone,
medicine has given you nothing but nonsense answers.
I know, I know. And I hear all these stories about how people that are on prednisone, like their whole lives, it eventually kills you, especially if I'm starting at 26. Like
Yeah.
it's not good. Anyways, so I started looking into Eastern medicine. I'd never been a believer. I had always made fun of it. I really didn't understand it.
Yeah.
Well, come to find out, 18 months later, they had cured everything. My back pain, my
Wait.
autoimmune,
I need to
everything.
know everything about this. So you went what kind of Eastern medicine were you doing? What did they tell you?
Yeah. Well, actually, the state that I was from, a very famous holistic clinic is there, which is
Huh.
ironic because I'm from Kansas. Okay. I'm not like
Yeah,
from
you would never think.
California or New York or something. So it's called the Reardon Clinic. It's
Hmm.
pretty well known in the holistic community. So I basically just checked myself in and I was like, fix me.
Yeah.
So I moved in with my in-laws. I'm married. I was married through this whole process. I met my husband actually after my like second surgery. So he knew, or my first surgery. So he knew he's been through this with
Yeah.
me. So
Yeah.
I moved in with my in-laws so that I could be treated at this clinic, spent every dime I had left to put my faith in them. You know, I had
Yeah.
no idea if it was going to work. But basically, I did daily vitamin C drips to rebuild my immune system. They put me on a ton of
Yeah.
supplements to rebuild my immune system because what had happened is I had no immune system left. It
Yeah.
had completely been obliterated by all the surgeries and drugs. And
Yeah.
so my body was just like running wild in there with no immune system,
Right.
and it was attacking itself and all kinds of things. So 18 months of very, very strict regimen. I worked very part-time. I think I was working 10 to 15 hours a week at a Lululemon because that's all I could handle.
Yeah.
For 18 months, and everything was reversed,
I
including my
gotta
back
say,
pain, which I didn't even expect.
yeah, I mean, I gotta say, I have not obviously experienced what you have, nor the length or extreme circumstances that you have, but like I had a weird flu a while ago, like a few months ago, and no doctors could tell me what it was. It wasn't COVID. Like I don't know what it was, but it was terrible and it lasted like a long time. And after like a week of like not being able to eat or drink barely anything, I was like feeling obviously like shit. And I finally decided to pay the like $275 to have the IV people come to my house and do the supplement drip.
Hmm.
And my God, it revived me immediately. Like immediately, the
Yeah.
color was back in my face. I was feeling like energy that I hadn't had in such a long time. So like I had never also I the only time I'd ever been confronted with those things was like in Vegas where I'm from and then like people do it for like hangover cures.
Right.
So I always thought it was kind of just like a like
Hmm.
obviously liquids are going to feel good after you're hungover, but honestly, like it worked so well and I was so impressed with the results of that I am I'm not surprised that it worked for you, which is also so ironic to me because like Western medicine is like here are all these band-aid solutions,
Hmm.
enjoy these medications to fix your symptoms, not the issue.
Right.
And like you go to an Eastern medicine practitioner and like they want to get to the root cause of your symptoms, and then also they're giving you supplements, they're not giving you medicine. Like they're I think it's amazing.
Yeah. All that to be said, that journey taught me that the root is important.
Yeah.
And this applies to business as well. Ironically, I know it seems like a stretch, but you ask how I know so many weird things. It's partly because of some weird experiences I've had. And
Yeah.
so learning that what looks like the problem is not really the problem, what that there is always a solution or there's always a reason for why something is misbehaving. I apply that in business, I apply that in life, I apply that in relationships, I apply that everywhere in the work that I do with my clients, and it was a big lesson I learned even just with my health.
Yeah.
So That's
Totally.
kind of the connection there.
That makes a lot of sense to me because I think that, interestingly, I don't know why people think this actually, like that business is some separate entity. No, it's a part of your life, it's a part of who you are. It comes from you.
Mhm.
Like your business is you. And if your mindset's not there, like your business is never going to be there.
Yep.
And I see this in like a friend of a friend's business. Like his mindset is all over the place and like his life is a hot mess. And so like his business is typically like a reflection of that experience, and like his unwillingness to change
Mhm.
is also like being reflected back in the business. So when somebody comes to you and is like, here's the challenges that we're facing in our business, like what are some of the first steps that you take them through?
Yeah, so because I have a background in business building, which is a separate story after all the health stuff, I went into a new career. But so I look at things from two perspectives. I look at what are the physical problems. So how's everything operating?
Mm.
Because that's very real too, right? And then I look at the behavioral stuff that's coming out of how the entrepreneur is operating and from a mindset perspective. So it's two perspectives. One is more of the, woo woo mindset stuff, and the other is the like operational, just matter of fact, how are things working or not?
You're a business doctor.
That's really
That's
funny. I like that.
That's literally what it sounds like because when you go to a doctor, they're like, okay, what are your physical symptoms? But they also want to know about your lifestyle. They're like,
Yeah.
do you exercise regularly? Do you drink alcohol on a regular basis?
How's your stress?
Yeah, and like all of these things contribute to like your physical well-being. And it's like, when you said that, I was like, oh my God, she's a business doctor. Like that's what she
Like
does.
that. That's so good. I'm gonna steal that for my marketing. Thank
I
you.
hope you do because like that's literally that's what it sounds like you do.
Right.
This is fantastic. Wait, so now I kind of want to go back. I want to know what happened after you made this miraculous recovery. Back pain is gone, and so you got into business.
Well, sort of. I had a new lease on life. I was super excited, like, wow, I am actually normal again. I mean, no medications, no pain, nothing, right? So, what did I do? I was like, I'm gonna travel in an RV.
Yes, big
my,
life. I love it.
my husband and I moved into an RV full time. And at this point,
Oh,
I was so like jaded about work because
yeah,
every time I would go to work, it just something would happen that it would crash. And so I convinced myself, you know what? I don't even need money. Screw it all. I'm just gonna go be happy, live my life. Like,
love this.
you know, um, well, turns out I do need money. Turns out
Yeah,
I do like having money and a certain lifestyle. So it was very rough 2.5 years in an RV of
this is
like,
literally me because I follow so many Instagram accounts of van life, and
yeah.
I look at it and I'm like, oh, the
Mhm.
freedom to travel and to go wherever you want. But
Yeah.
then I look at their like the insides of their vans and like everything is cramped and there's like no
Mhm.
space, and she's like driving around trying to find a parking lot that's 24 hours, and she's like cooking the most random meals in her tiny van, and I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
I That is a good life choice for someone that is not me.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and the thing is, we were doing this before Starlink,
Oh
before
my God, that's
remote working. Like we were young. I was like 26, I guess. I don't
yeah.
know. So it was before anyone was
Oh,
doing this,
yeah.
okay? So like imagine this, but with no resources. No one's really paved the way.
Like full hippie vibes.
Yeah. So it's like I went to this extreme side of my lifestyle and,
Mm,
and it's great. Like I go all in when I'm committed and it
I'm the same
allows me
way.
to fully experience something. So
Yeah.
anyways, 2.5 years of doing that got a little old for a lot of reasons, financial reasons. Just the lifestyle is hard. It
Yeah.
is. It's not simple, as people say, or minimalist or whatever. I mean, it'd be easier now for sure, but we had to drive somewhere every single day to work because there was not unlimited internet, right?
Right.
So we were spending 8 hours in Paneras chugging coffee. Anyways, so I was like, what am I doing with my life? I do want money. I do want a career. I'm just been hurt, right? A
Yeah.
few times
Yeah.
over. And so I was like, okay, what the hell am I going to do? I want to work from home because that was becoming a thing at that point. So I looked up the 5 most influential people that I could find in the entrepreneur space, and
Hmm.
I just reached out to them and I was like, "Hey, I want to
Who
work
are
for
those
you.
people?
I don't have any skills." So I was in politics before.
You're like, I have no
Um,
relevant experience.
but I'm a really hard worker and a fast learner,
Oh
like
my
interview
God.
me.
Yes.
So 2 of them gave me an interview. Okay. One of them hired me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that happened to be a business coach, a not more than a business coach. That sells them short. They are one of the best scaling companies, I think, out there. It's called Scale 2X with Austin Netzley, and he gave me a job. Bless his heart. It started my life over. I learned all the ins and outs of business. I loved it because
Yeah.
it's very logical, it's very like process oriented, it's very simple in my mind, and it makes sense. I loved it. So soaked that all up for I think a year and a half, and then I went out on my own and was working with clients to help them streamline, systemize, organize, and scale their businesses. So
I love that. I love
so what I realized though in that endeavor is that the mindset is the key to making
Hmm.
any business strategy work or any business grow. And so after banging my head against a wall with entrepreneurs that wouldn't listen, I pivoted and decided to make the focus on mindset first with strategy second. And that
Hmm.
changed everything.
Wait, so why were all these entrepreneurs like banging their head against the wall? What was the common like frustration?
Well, I was banging my head against the wall because
Ah.
they wouldn't follow the strategy because of their either chaotic life or their mindset. So they would sabotage the
Ah.
strategy.
Like
Yeah.
you would be like, look at all these amazing tools that I built for you. All you have to do is use them, and then they wouldn't use them because like they literally couldn't get it together to use them.
Yeah. They have imposter syndrome or shiny object syndrome or lack of follow through, all the typical, entrepreneur characteristics that prevent people from being able to grow and scale.
So how do you have that conversation with them where you're like, you are a hot mess. Here's how I can help you utilize these strategies that I'm building for you so you can succeed.
Well, now I lead with that. And I
Okay.
talk about how strategy is not your problem. There is literally infinite business resources online, in books, in podcasts. Information and strategy is not the problem. Business is actually quite simple. It's a formula. What is always the problem is the people, right? Whether it's your
Mm.
team or yourself. The
Yeah.
people, because we are so unpredictable, we're so emotionally driven, we're so just we can't be put into a process or a system. That's where things break down, is with people.
Mm. That's amazing. I think this is like a really important point to note because it's like there is information everywhere. And I've been thinking about this for a long time. And it's like why I think school doesn't work for some people because, that system and that process is designed for very specific people. And if you don't fit in that, like school is very, very challenging. And it's not like school's fault, it's not your fault. It's just you have to figure out what works best for you.
Right.
And thankfully there's a plethora of information out there at your disposal that you can use. But it's like I think it goes back to that old adage, like, if you teach a man how to fish versus fishing for him, and it's like you have to go out and use the tools. And if you can't use the fishing rod, you're
Right.
not going to catch fish, regardless.
Yep. Yep. That's what I run into all the time. And that's why there's so many programs out there for businesses to help them grow. And yet very few people are approaching it from the perspective of mindset.
Yeah, I think it's like entrepreneurs specifically need to do a lot of like inner work
Hmm.
in order to be the most successful versions of themselves because a lot of the time through this entrepreneurial process of starting a business, so many issues that live within you will be reflected back
Yep.
at you through some point. I mean, even like the major ones like dealing with failure and resiliency, like these things are hard concepts. And if you can find ways to deal with them in your daily life, you can navigate them much more easily in your entrepreneurial experience. Like, I think a lot about working out is such a big one. Like, I lift weights like 4 days a week. And when you're lifting weights, like I'm confronted with failure every single time. And if
Mm-hmm.
I'm not failing every single time, then like I can go heavier.
Mm-hmm.
And having that like failure consistently built into me and having it be like exciting and being like, ah, yes, like I'm hitting a good limit right now.
Mm-hmm.
It prepares me for the future when like inevitably the other ventures that I've had in my past failed. And it's like,
Right.
I'm not going to have I mean, I did have an existential crisis, but like, I'm not going to have another existential crisis if like this podcast fails, for example, because
Mm-hmm.
like, it's fine. It's just like, okay, that either like that strategy didn't work or like my mindset wasn't in the right spot at the time or like, there's a myriad of things that could
Mm-hmm.
be the reason why, but it's like you build that mindset over time. And without
Mm-hmm.
that, you're just going to crumble into pieces.
Yes, you have to change how you relate to things.
Mhm.
And that in order to succeed in business, you do have to relate to things a certain way, right? So in the work that I do, failure is data, right?
I
That's
love
it.
that.
It's
I
just
love that.
data. And what do we do with data? We analyze data and we do something with data. We don't
Yeah.
just cry about it. We might cry about it too, but like then
Yeah.
we'll
Like
then we'll work
I
on
might
it.
shed a tear, but like I will like wake up the next morning or
Yeah.
like I will dry my tears and then I will go to work.
Right, right. And it's understanding that there is an emotional element to all of these things, but we
Yeah.
have to separate, right? And that's where I go back to separating the mindset from the physical stuff, right? There is data that is the like physical stuff that we need to figure out. Why didn't it work? What happened? What went wrong? And then there's the emotional, like, why did it affect you the way that it did? Is it because it
Mm.
reminded you of a time when your friend rejected you when you were 8 years old? Did it remind you of a time when your dad let you down and you were, scared about whether he was going to come through for you, right? Like
Yeah.
there's always a physiological reaction based on our past traumas. And then there is the physical, like, how is this working or not working? And they're two separate things. And often we just feel, because we feel the physiological, that's what we relate to more than
Yeah.
being able to look at it objectively and say, yes, this had an impact on me, but also there's a solution here because I can look at this data and figure it out.
Yeah. Did you have to like get a I don't know. Do you have like psychology experience? Because I feel like inevitably at some point in your business experience, you were like a therapist to some of the entrepreneurs. Like I feel like it had to have been that way because like nobody knows about this kind of stuff where it's like, oh, you have to be a passive observer in your own emotional
Yeah.
experience without having gone through some sort of therapy
Mm-hmm.
or like had this experience for yourself where you're like, oh, like for me, it came out through journaling. Like that is how I learned to be a passive observer to my experiences and like be able to separate between why I'm having a response and like how I respond to that situation. So I
Yeah, well, so it was my own experience partly. So when I left, when I was doing the business coaching and I decided I wanted to work on mindset, I I was basically going to start a new business
yeah.
because this other thing was more um like I was a contractor. And so it was 40 hours a week type of thing, or like 20 hours for one client, 20 hours for another. It was a lot of hours where I wanted to shift into really being a business owner with clients instead of like a part of people's teams.
Yeah, totally.
So so when I set out to build that business, every time that I would show up to build it, I would have a panic attack.
Huh.
And I was like,
Like an actual panic attack?
yeah. Some, not always horrible, sometimes horrible. One time it happened in an airport and I just was like so overwhelmed I was having a panic attack. And I couldn't understand what was happening because I have all the skills, I have all the knowledge to build a business. I literally do that for a living.
Right.
I'm surrounded by all these entrepreneur friends that are like, Phoebe, just do it. Like, this is great. You should do it. Do it, do
You're
it, do it.
clearly intelligent. You're clearly capable. Like,
Yeah. But every time I would sit down to work on it, I would I would just resist it
Mm.
wholeheartedly. And I could not figure out what's going on. But what was happening is I had PTSD from success equaling a health crash. So every time that I would show up
No.
to work on my business, my body would literally be so afraid that if I create more success, I'm going to end up,
Yeah.
you
Like
know,
literally in the hospital.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So when I realized that's what was happening, and it would be so bad that I would get so triggered that I wouldn't sleep for like 36 hours. It was so,
Whoa.
I'm not talking like little mild, like heart palpitations. I'm talking like I was out for
Yeah.
days on end. So
When
I,
did you realize that? Like what was the moment when you were like, this is the connection?
well, I realized that it was showing up elsewhere. So I heard
Okay.
about a friend that had a stroke, like my age, had a stroke, and seeing him in the hospital on Facebook triggered me. And so when I saw that and I was like, "Oh my God," and I got like a panic attack, I was like, "Holy crap." I'm like reacting to hospital scenes and hospital
Yeah.
things
Yeah. Yeah.
everywhere because I'd had, a decade of in and out of hospitals and treatments and everything. And even though I had recovered, my body had not forgotten that, and it viewed everything hospital related as like a threat. And
Totally.
so or anything that could be associated with that. So I
Mm.
started to recognize, oh, I think I have PTSD.
Literal PTSD.
What? Yeah. So I did do therapy. And I did hire a coach. So I hired a coach. The last $10,000 that I had at the time, used that to invest in a coach to help me figure out how to overcome this stuff and build the business that I wanted, because he taught me how to do the mindset work with clients. Like it's like I had studied all the psychology and all the things, but what's the framework? What's
Yeah.
the, because like for business, it's easy for me because it's like so logical and just there's methods, there's ways. But with mindset, I'm like, whoa, that's feels messy to me. So I was
And it's
able
also like
to,
how do you start with clients? Like how do you get into
yeah.
that? Then how do you build like a framework around that to then help them through it?
Yeah. So, because I work with entrepreneurs, we first do a business audit where we're
Mm.
looking at everything that needs to be done there in the physical, right? Which is usually the simplest part.
Yeah.
And then we do a life audit and we look at how's the health of everything in your life, relationships, how you're operating, like your day to day, gosh, why can't I think of, money, family, physical health, all of the different wheel of life sort of areas.
Yeah.
And so once we get an audit of what we're dealing with, then we look at, okay, what do we need to triage here immediately so that we can get you to a stable place so you're out of survival, because when we're in survival it's really hard to build. So we first got to get people to a good solid place where they feel like they're actually able to start working on things. It's
Yeah.
it's sad because so often I see entrepreneurs that are in survival buying all these programs, but because they're not at that foundational level of peace, they're not able to really take action on them and they end up
Mm.
wasting a ton of money, right?
Yeah. Because it's like they want the help, but they're not in the place yet to
Yes.
receive it.
Yes, breaks my heart.
Yeah.
And I talk to people all the time that are like, "Well, I invested in coaching before and I never did anything." And I'm like, I know, I get that. I don't do that to you, I promise. So we first got to get people to a place where they are at some level of peace, and then from there, I start teaching them the mindset perspective, the approach. We diagnose everything about their current mindset because there are elements of that are good and there are elements of that aren't working for you, and we need to suss out which is which and
Yeah.
start getting rid and reprogramming the mindset that's not working for you and leaning in on what is working for you, and start applying that to the strategy and the action and the vision.
I'm sure you can immediately tell what people's mindsets are from like the first call. Like I'm sure there's words that they use or
Yes,
phrases or tones that immediately dictate to you like exactly where they are.
definitely. Because there are also people that don't use the words on purpose, and I can tell they're not.
No,
Like, I
give
can
me
tell you're
an
trying to hide from me.
example. Wait, tell me an example because that's hilarious.
Like, Oh, that's hard to think of an example. So it's sort of like they think they're saying, so like when you're trying to game like a personality test or something or a job
Yes.
questionnaire,
Yes.
you're answering them the way you know they want you to answer, but the
Yeah.
person receiving that knows nobody's that perfect. Like you just
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Or it's like a super peppy person who's like, seems like they're so happy all the
Yes.
time. And you're like, girl, I
Yeah.
know you are not this happy 100% of the time. Like, that's
Yep.
impossible.
Yeah, we call that toxic positivity. And
Mhm.
people think that that's what I want to hear as a coach is that, oh, I'm never admitting that I'm afraid or I'm never admitting that this isn't going well or whatever. And to me, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Like I'm very clear about my demons and my
Yeah.
shadows and my dark side and my failures and my weaknesses, and I have a great relationship to them. I don't try to
Yeah.
hide from them. I don't try to pretend like they don't exist. I coexist with them.
Yeah. That was always my problem was like, I was always like trying to, I just would pretend like they literally didn't exist. Like,
Yep.
I would put in the mindset that I'm like, oh, like I'm a boss babe, like I got this, like nothing can phase me, like, oh, like, people's comments don't bother me. And when that's a lie, that was a
Yes.
lie. Like to
Mhm.
try to ignore them only makes them bigger and then like scarier to deal with. And also it makes it so much harder to listen to myself. Like it took me so long to develop a relationship with myself again because I had ignored myself for so long and like built a facade of strength like as an outward front and like I was high achieving like
Mhm.
throughout my entire life and recently I had to like strip everything back and like start from scratch and it was so hard because
Mhm.
it was just a lot of me having to like ask myself questions and like honestly answer them in like the smallest of scenarios. Everything from oh okay, well I woke up today, like what do I want to do? Do I want coffee or tea? And
Mhm.
like that's where it had to start and then each time I would just have to follow like what my gut wanted and then eventually we got back to a place where now like I'm more connected, I'm more in tune, but it came from like a long time, like 25 years of
Mhm.
ignoring.
Yes. Well, and that's part that goes back to as well, the mindset that got you here won't get you there, right? A lot
Yeah.
of entrepreneurs stuff down their emotions in order to compartmentalize and get the work
Yeah.
done. And especially women, because women are told repeatedly as they're growing up that their emotions are in the way of what they want.
Yes.
And because women don't know how to use their emotions for good, they can't separate the bad emotions from a good use of emotions. Emotions are partly women's superpower. And
Totally.
so if we have a relationship to that as being bad or limiting in some way, or we don't know how to separate what is helpful emotion versus unhelpful emotion, then we reject it completely and we become this hardened version of us that it quells our creativity
Yes.
and our ability to do multiple things at once, like all the things that make us powerful as women.
Totally.
And so the mindset that got you here won't get you there. A lot of entrepreneurs have become emotionally repressed because they needed to in order to face the fears of building a business. But
Hmm.
that is one of the many things that is going to hold you back in scaling eventually as when you need to.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think like the understanding my emotions and using them as like a guidepost almost really helps me to navigate like icky circumstances. It always saves me. Like always. I know the second I get a message from somebody and I read their message like being like, "Oh, hey, I want to be on your podcast." I know immediately like whether or not I should follow up with you or not because I can tell. And like at the beginning, of my podcast, I was just saying yes to everything because it felt, you're not really in an abundance mindset when you first start a podcast. You're like, I have no guests, help. And then all of a sudden, when you're being flooded with people, you're like, well, this is what I wanted. I have to say yes to everybody. And then, like, fast forward inevitably leads to burnout, et cetera, et cetera. And then now utilizing those emotions and being like, I got like an icky feeling about this situation. That is so helpful. Like,
Mhm.
without that, I feel like I'm blind.
Yeah, that's another thing too that I work on with my clients because what I say about your emotions or your intuition is we call that your magic, right?
Yeah.
Because it can't really be explained, and we've all experienced it in some way, shape, or form. One of the things that I help my clients do is take their magic and turn it into systems.
Mm,
So that magic that you feel when you are someone comes across your screen and you're like yes or no, that intuition, that magic that you have is actually based on something.
yeah.
And it can be you can actually uh, like create some sort of system or framework for that magic. And
Yes.
sometimes creative people or women, I mean men too, I'm sure, but like especially women and creative people have a really hard time understanding their magic because this world is built on logical principles. Um,
Yes.
so being able to translate your magic into something that you can create a business from is really, really hard.
I I'm living for this because I have girlfriends who are very much like on the feminine. They're like very creative. They're like they're like super feminine. And I've always like I've always felt like I was a little bit half and half. Like not in that like I have masculine energy. I just think that like I love process. I love
Mhm.
logic and like I think it was partially how I was raised. My mom is very like logic forward. My dad obviously is like very logic forward. So that's how I was raised, and I love logic and I love process. Like it just helps me like stay grounded and focused, and like to to finally talk to somebody who recognizes the power of both sides is very exciting because as women, I feel like this is how we succeed as business women. And the best part about it is that the way women conduct business and think about business is very different from men. Like,
Yep.
and how we physiologically are also leads us to have a very different relationship with our business. Like we need time to rest and recover, and that's more time than men require, and that's just like our physiological makeup. But it's also what makes us incredibly powerful.
Yes. Yes. And I was like you. Actually, I was probably extreme. Because I had a challenging childhood that forced me into my masculine at a pretty young age. And so I was the opposite. I rejected all of the feminine and I went full like boss babe,
Boy. Yeah.
masculine energy.
Yeah.
And partly it was because of how I was raised, right? I was raised that, my mom, her reality in the 80s was that you got to be like the men to succeed. And so
Oh
I
my
was
gosh,
like,
same with my mom. Yes, my mom literally like changed her name to
oh,
be like masculine because men wouldn't take her seriously. They
yep.
wouldn't respond to her emails if they knew that she was a woman. And like that's how it was back in the day.
Mhm.
And like she would always tell me about these kinds of
Me
things. And this
too.
is how she would teach me, where she was like, you have to be like one of them in order to succeed.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep. So I, being the good little, regimented, disciplined person that I am, really took that to heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what that caused was well, burnout for one, and just not enjoying the process of doing these
Yes.
things in life, right? And so I had to do the opposite of what a lot of women have to do, which is I had to learn the feminine side. I had to learn to allow that. I had to get in touch with that. I had to understand it. The feminine, creative, flowy, goddessy, whatever you want to call it, side of
Good.
myself.
Yeah.
And had to integrate that back in because I had rejected it for so long. And that's, I think, part of what the appeal is for the people I work with that maybe tend more feminine, whether they're men or women. They really gravitate towards my strong masculine. And I have the ability to understand the feminine because I've worked to purposely integrate that back in, but I also help very creative or feminine people integrate their masculine, right? And vice versa if their challenge is the feminine, right? So I
Yeah.
work with a lot of very masculine successful entrepreneurial women and men,
Yeah.
and
Well, it's
integrating that
balance,
feminine.
totally. Like all of us have a balance with both sides. And when they're not in balance is like when things are challenging or go awry. And we have to have both sides in order to be like the best versions of ourselves. And I think that there's obviously exceptions to that rule. And I think that most of the time I wouldn't consider like the exceptions to those rules like particularly entrepreneurial. And I think that as a woman, if you want to have your own business, like you do have to have a little bit of both sides. And the power comes from recognizing like where your strengths are and when to apply which aspects of yourself in which scenarios.
Yes. Yes.
It's something I've learned recently and that I'm still coming to terms with, I think. Like, it's been a journey, but do you have any advice or like how did you reintegrate your feminine side? What was that process like for you?
Yeah, so for me, that looked like allowing rest.
Mm.
It looked like it, mm, I mean, rest was the biggest thing. And then, oh, so a lot of the creative feminine energy is also about intuition and trust. If you are only in the masculine and you have to have a process, what are you going to do when you don't know the process, right? And so whenever I was faced with like having to go into the unknown and not have a process or a strategy because it there is none, right? On which
Yeah.
is so much of entrepreneurship, you're just like guessing.
Yeah, it's a lot of trial and error. You're like, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if this makes
Yes.
sense. Like, I've
Yes.
never done this before.
Yeah. So, in order for me to be able to do that, I had to develop a relationship with um, allowing and accepting and receiving and letting things play
Mhm.
out and patience and all of those sorts of attributes.
Yeah, I think that trust is such a big one. Like, that was another one that was really hard for me. Like, trust in the unknown and trusting that it's not like it's a more like trusting that everything works out. That's
Mhm,
the hardest thing. Is it's
mhm,
like accepting that everything will always work out and trusting that that is the process. So when things become unclear and you have a choice in front of you and you don't know you can't make a pro and con list about this particular choice, like you just have to trust, and the only thing that you can trust in that moment is whatever your instinct is telling you.
mhm,
And it comes from like small moments of when that occurs in your daily life, following it, and then like it will, over time you will grow to like understand it and hear it much more clearly, and then it becomes easier to then like listen to it and trust it.
mhm. Yeah, and it's it's funny because you can still apply process to trust in a way, and this is what helped me to develop a relationship to that
Mm.
is because what you can do is uh like I don't know if this strategy is going to work, but I'm going to create a very clear strategy with a clear action plan, with a deadline, with milestones along the way to measure the is it working, is it not working type of thing. And that helped me to like relax into being able to trust something because it did have a sort of process to
Yeah.
it. There was no way to know that if I was going to waste my time or not with it and it wasn't going to work. But that was something that I just had to learn is part of doing business, and that my impatience or my desire to have it all figured out is going to only hold me back, and my desire to move forward has to be greater than my fear of making the wrong choice.
Yeah. What are your biggest challenges when you work with clients? Like, do you get a lot of resistance?
Oh man, it's different for every person. So I have a lot of clients that have very, very challenging like family stuff. My clients are typically older than me. They're 45 to, well, 40 to, well, 45 to 55-ish.
Yeah.
There's a few that are younger, but they have very challenging family situations. One client in particular had a really horrible relationship with her two daughters and her sister, and had horrible, horrible childhood trauma. So that was the chaos in her life was causing her business to just tank over time.
Mm.
So we do a ton of work on her relationship to she became like the savior for all of these people in her life and not saving herself at all. And so we had to really work on changing her mindset around that. Another client that I work with, he had so many opportunities on his doorstep, and he avoided the big opportunities, the ones that would move forward towards his vision, and 10x his business, to take the smaller, more comfortable opportunities over and
Mhm.
over. And he knew this, but like couldn't stop, right?
Yeah.
So in working with me, I helped him figure out why he was resisting these bigger opportunities that were going to lead to everything that he wanted, and continuing to repeat the pattern with the smaller opportunities. And literally within a month, we added like $500,000 to his revenue
Wow.
for the year,
Casual.
just to start,
Yeah, just a casual 500,000.
just by saying yes to what he knows he needs to say yes to. So,
What is the step one for your clients? Like, I want to leave people, like, if somebody's at the point where they're like, okay, they've listened to this episode, they're like, I really need to address my mindset. What do you recommend is like step one for everyone to get started?
well, I actually created a free training for this because I get this
Right.
question a lot. So if you want an intro, not even an intro, it is the full process, but to get the results from the full process, you can't really just get it from the training. But
Right.
I created a training to walk people through the exact process that I do with my clients. So you can, it is fully comprehensive. It's like a
Oh,
15-page
yes.
workbook included. I mean, you're getting everything. It's not some teaser. But I do have a free training that walks people through the exact steps. The first step is to identify what your current mindset looks like, how it's supporting you or working against you. The second step then is to look at what's the vision. The third step then is to build the new mindset that is aligned with that vision. And then the final step is to put it all into a strategy and action plan, and take action from the new mindset and start rewriting the old. So that's kind of the process.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Where can people find this?
You'll go to Your Life Architect. That's my business, Life Architect. yourlifearchitect.com/mind reset.
That is stunning. And I think it's like the perfect place to close the episode where,
Yeah.
because I was going to ask you where everyone can find you, and thank you for answering. And I highly recommend that everyone listening go and get this because this is like free gold.
Yeah.
Phoebe, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic episode. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think there's going to be a part two in our future. So, if for everyone who enjoyed it, I would love to have Phoebe back because I think there's just so much more to unpack with this kind of stuff.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Maddie.